There's a mark on every stage around the world that signifies the center of its depth and width, called center. Friend of the pod, James Whiteside, has dreamed of standing on that very mark as a principal dancer with the prestigious American Ballet Theatre ever since he was a 12-year-old, blown away by watching the company's spring gala. This new, almost memoir, Center, is an exuberant behind-the-scenes tour of Whiteside's triple life, both on and off stage. Hear us chat with James about the inspiration behind the book, what the writing process was like, and what he hopes readers will ultimately take away from this collection of essays in episode 247. Grab your copy of Center now, wherever books are sold, or click the link in the description of this episode.
I'm Rebecca King-Ferraro.
And I'm Michael Sean Breeden, and you're listening to Conversations on Dance.
Today we are revisiting the 2021 Vail Dance Festival and one of our favorite chats from the summer. This week on the pod, we sit down with New York City-based musician Caroline Shaw. Caroline is a vocalist, violinist, composer, and producer. She was one of the youngest recipients of the Pulitzer Prize for Music in 2013 for Partita for 8 Voices, written for the Grammy-winning Roomful of Teeth, of which she is a member. She has collaborated with incredible artists, including Kanye West, Nas, Renee Fleming, The National, and so many others. Check out her website, carolineshaw.com, for a full list of her work. Caroline has been an integral part of the Vail Dance Festival now for years, collaborating with dancers, choreographers, and making new works. We had so much fun getting the opportunity to sit down and nerd out with her about all things dance and music. At the end of the episode, we are including Caroline's track that she created in collaboration with Jookin dancer Lil Buck for a piece called 38109. This work debuted at the 2018 Vail Dance Festival, ran again this year, and was just a part of City Center's Fall for Dance. We talk about this track in the episode and even embarrass ourselves a little bit by singing it for her. So enjoy. Hi, Caroline Shaw. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. We're so happy.
Adelaide Shaw.
That's true. I forgot that. Sorry. We're so happy to have you. We spoke with you in Vail a few years ago, and you were with Justin Peck for that interview. So we're happy to have you just by yourself and really dive into what makes you tick.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
So let's go back to the beginning for anyone that may not have heard that episode from, 1997, whatever. And just learn a little bit about your the origins of your love of music. When did you first realize that music was going to be a big part of your life?
There's a very specific memory when I was 14 years old and I played in this piano trio and I was like, it's like where you feel like you're part of something else. And I thought, I'm going to do this for the rest of my life. But, I started playing violin when I was about 2 years old. My mom teaches violin and is a singer and, just sort of, you start to feel something really strongly early on, and then you have of course I had a lot of questions about, is this possible? What does it mean to be a musician? Right. What does it look like? And for a long time I thought I was supposed to be just a classical violinist, but I wanted to write music and sing, and have gotten really lucky to work with a lot of people since then.
How many instruments do you play?
I play the violin well, the piano medium, and I sing in my own way. I don't know if it's good or bad, but it's what I do.
It's very good.
And I can play like some other random things.
Yeah. So how much of a role did your mom play then in kind of like guiding you and your career? Was she a professional or just?
Yes, she had been a professional singer, and then she took time off to have all of us children.
See, I gotcha.
And then she was a Suzuki violin teacher, so she taught 3 and 4-year-olds violin, and she was just a wonderful kind of guide early on,
right?
And and my dad is a doctor and amateur pianist and loves music, but is tone deaf. Dad, I love you. Sorry, I said that. Yeah,
I don't want to go on too big of a detour, but like the idea of teaching 3 and 4-year-olds violin is so fascinating to me, because when you teach a ballet, it's your own body. And so 3 and 4-year-olds, they kind of just do things that are like, it's athletic, or you're skipping, or you're running around. But to have something outside of your own body that you're learning at 3, what is that like?
Yeah.
I don't remember it at all, because I was literally 2. It was like you sort of learning at the same time as I was speaking. But I think about how kids learn to, hold a fork or a spoon, like that dexterity. It's
right.
like, if you could do that, you can hold an instrument somehow. and music does kind of function linguistically. And so it's really fun to watch kids kind of step into it. But the violin sounds terrible.
I was going to say,
it's one of those instruments that just sounds exquisite when it's played well. And there's a long, long period that requires patience from parents.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So when did you start to think like, oh, maybe like the composition side of music is what I'm interested in?
I started, writing a few things when I was a teenager, but I didn't really know how to write music. It was mostly like, oh, I really like that Brahms sonata. I want to write something like that. And then when I got, in my 20s, I started writing music for friends, basically for people who are around me, not ever thinking it would be something that one could even do professionally. I still don't even know if that's what I do. I don't really know what I do, but I like making music for people who are nearby. And now I write music for, orchestras and singers that I don't necessarily know, but at its heart, it's about making things for friends.
Yeah. So it's interesting to me. You mentioned like, oh, that's Brahms sonata is inspiring to me, and I want to try something maybe in that voice. It seems like a lot of people, as they're finding their way into whatever respective art form, like Jamar Roberts was talking about how his early choreography was like Jamar is Pina, Jamar is Balanchine. Or like if you go see like a Van Gogh exhibition, you see these works that are like really outside of what we think of Van Gogh then becoming. So is that something you flirted with in the beginning, like trying out these yourself in maybe voices you admire, like composers you admire?
Yeah, I think so. I love that you that Jamar said that as well. Like you don't do it necessarily consciously when you're young. You're sort of just stepping into something that you love.
Right.
And I think that's always something really important, I think, to keep in mind for young creators and older creators. Like anyone creating something is create from a place of loving. And then you'll sort of find your way through that as long as you eventually, hopefully, get away from the imitation.
Right.
But I love learning within something. And even now, I still love to do that. Like I have a project where I wrote a piano concerto based on Beethoven's third piano concerto, but it has like these little bits of quotes that are woven in and out, which is now actually a big ballet by Pam Tanowitz. And then this piece for Justin is kind of digging into the Tchaikovsky music for the Chaipa, the Penda. And then like, finding like, what are the kernels of seeds of something that I love in here? What do I love about Tchaikovsky and how he thought about music? And then within that, finding something that's new and different. And of course, now I do a lot of my own stuff that's not quoting anything, but I like returning to that feeling of, I love this so much. Let me climb inside that skin and then like bust it open with my own weird body.
So you're talking about this piece that you're working on here at Vail Dance Festival with Justin Peck. That's an all new piece. We were just the other night at the up close performance where you and Damien Wetzel, the artistic director, were talking about. He mentioned that some of the what was the word he used? It was I wrote it down. He said, oh, the music makes you swoon. There's moments that make you swoon. And then you quoted kind of the inspiration for that and where that came from kind of within history. So that kind of makes me think too, like you're saying, some inspirations that you take from other choreographers or other composers.
Oh yeah, for sure. I think there's always some music that makes you swoon. There's music that made us swoon when we were 15, the music that makes you swoon now. Right. And that was a very generous thing of Damien to say. He says some very nice things. But I think and letting yourself enjoy that feeling. And there are a lot of different things, but I also love music that makes me feel itchy and makes me feel angry or makes me feel a lot of different things. But the sense of being carried away by something or accessing something that you can't in any other way. That's really, that's music. That's the thing. And you can't do it all the time. And you can't have a whole piece that does that, but you make a piece of music that hopefully surrounds that one moment. And hopefully there's something.
I think it's great too that Damien used that word, because if you think about, to me at least, Tchaikovsky at large, like there's always this like sort of beautiful, I guess, sentimental, sometimes romantic and very melancholy, and like that Tchaikovsky is such a swoon. So this is I
know he's so it's very, there's like, I'm sure there's a whole book written about the sentimentality in Tchaikovsky and a lot of ballet music. Now we hear it with a frame of nostalgia, and all, like every time you hear it, you're building on all the times you've heard it before, which is, I think, is a really interesting thing that music can do. I'm sure that's the way you see with dance. You see the same thing. You see it. You've seen it many times before, and you're building on that memory.
Right. So let's talk a little bit about the origins of this piece. Sure. Because it'll help us understand too how you collaborate within dance. So there's this commission. Justin's making a new ballet. Justin Peck, he is a huge admirer. I mean, it was so fun to see Justin fangirl over you.
Yeah.
Oh, this is
but
the feeling is mutual.
Yeah. At what point do you guys start conversation about what sort of expectations are? Is there a typical way this works? Like, does the choreographer say, this is my concept, and you have a back and forth? Or what's the range in there in terms of assignments, I guess?
Yeah, right. I think every, choreographer is a little bit different. Some want to have a long process of like back and forth and trying things. And sometimes it's an electronic score, but for this project, we knew there was a very clear date,
right?
A very clear sort of time. We wanted it to be between 7 and 10 minutes, and I wanted to work with Brooklyn Ryder, the string quartet that's here that I love, and so that already kind of puts it into some framework. Right. And then Justin and I took a long walk in New York sometime earlier this spring. It was right before he had his baby, and he talked about wanting to do a pas de deux and thinking about that form. And I sort of know a little bit about it. And I said, I love diving into old forms like that as well. And then kind of pushing outside of it, which I did in a piece called Partita for 8 Voices, which actually Justin's going to choreograph later. So I kind of did a deep dive into what the parts of it are. And he explained to me, so there's usually there's a beginning, and then they dance together, and then there's a male variation, a female variation. They come back together, and then it's like show off time, back and forth. Right. And then they do something, and then it's a big hit at the end. So what if we do that, but kind of subvert it a little bit? Like Armand's variation is not low and heavy and oompa like things normally are for the male variation. It's very, very light. I love thinking about Tyler's entrance and like when she's gonna, like, how does she enter at the end? And I wrote this big chromatic flourish that I think is really fun.
Yes.
And then we came here, and I had written most of the music last month and had a kind of MIDI robot version of it that he could listen to, and we're changing a little bit of it here as it goes. And then, of course, once you hand the music to the musicians, it comes alive in a totally different way.
Right. I'm super curious. I guess in particular about the male variation. Firstly, in that the quote that you take there is from the pas de deux.
Yes.
And secondly, the use of pizzicata. It's like, to me, there are two points in ballet. There's a Ramona variation that has that, and then a Sylvia pas de deux variation. And of course, it's both for the woman.
Yeah.
So were you aware of that? Is that something that you could, as Justin's saying, he wants to sort of like subvert the idea of what a male variation is? Were you thinking like, oh, this is going to evoke that feeling, or?
I didn't know about the specific references to Sylvia and the other one, but I did think very specifically about wanting to create a, more traditionally light, I guess we would say feminine sounding music for to dial that in, but for him. And we talked about that. Right. Yeah. Just changing it a little bit.
Right.
Yeah.
But then choosing to use the pas de deux as a quote versus like the female variation. Is that just
that? I think I just like the music better.
Like
Yes. I just like, it's a little bit intuitive.
Curious, yeah.
Sometimes you're listening. I actually, when I do something like this, I listen like kind of obsessively to the music and like just on repeat for hours and just let it kind of marinate, and then the salient elements will kind of pop out. It's like, oh, that phrase is the thing that's really delicious and loopable, and then you kind of sample it and work from there. So it just happened to be from the pas de deux.
Right.
I love that. Is that a challenge at all to make sure that you are taking these quotes here and there and you're kind of doing something inspired on something that already exists, but still making it your own? Because it strikes such a balance to us. We were mentioning
totally.
Like there's just like these little moments and you pick them out and but then the rest is obviously you.
Right. Yeah. I used to be, actually, I decided early on not to be too concerned with it. I think in pop music, the sampling is a big thing. So a hip hop artist will pick a phrase of something and loop it and sample it. And that reference becomes a huge part of the piece. And then the song is something different. And I kind of like it when an audience is kind of confused about whether they're hearing my music or Tchaikovsky. Like you're not quite sure. For me, it feels like a dream. If you have a dream and you see a face that you're not quite sure what it is, and it twists into something else. Yeah. I think it's a really fun thing to do with music. And I mean, I hope that people don't think that I think that I wrote some of the Tchaikovsky music. Like I'm very keenly aware that,
but
that it is a quote.
There's a long history within music of doing that sort of thing. And specifically even within the ballet world, there's like, I'm thinking of this clip. I hope I don't misquote Stravinsky. But it's something like they're talking about, I think maybe Basic de la Fé, he does a None But the Lonely Heart quote at the end. And it's Stravinsky in black and white film. And it's like, it's okay. I'm allowed to take from Tchaikovsky. I'm allowed because I love Tchaikovsky. And he knows. You know?
Really? I feel that is, I got to find that.
Something along those lines. It's definitely in the Balanchine documentary somewhere.
I feel exactly the same way. It's like, I feel like you can anyone when I'm dead, you can do whatever you want with my music. You can put it on record. And I also feel like I interact with music that I love. Like I love it. I deeply love the music. I also think, some of it is really silly. Sometimes I don't think Tchaikovsky did like the greatest thing ever, but I love him and his music and how he thinks about it. And so I do feel like a little permission. It's like, oh, he's a friend of mine. It's okay.
I love that.
Yeah.
I do want to go back a little bit so you're playing violin, you're playing, the piano. How many other instruments do you have to try to like dabble in a little bit in order to write a score for like you do? It's funny. I can, like, if you're writing a score for orchestra, it's not expected that you can be a great trumpet player, but you generally know how the trumpet and the clarinet and the bassoon work. Right.
I would never, I know that I'll never really play the bassoon.
Right.
But I play this, I know all string instruments really well. So generally when I write, I kind of put the hard, kind of complicated stuff with them and I leave the others to be more vocal. It's not expected that certainly not that you can play everything, but that you're familiar with the instrument. And for me, I like to be familiar with the people who play the instrument and the tradition of that. Like, I don't want to just write for, Bob the bassoonist, and I don't care who he is, and like just do whatever I say. So like, but what do bassoonists like to play, and how does their instrument work really well? It's like when you choreograph for a dancer, it's not just like do this no matter who you are, but like, what is this person speaking? So I like to think about it.
I do think that that's interesting because you're already like revealing something of your own compositional style. Like I imagine, like we've talked to a range of choreographers, and some people are so interested and invested in the idea of what they can draw out of specific dancers.
Right.
And some people come in with a vision.
Right.
I mean, to me, that's like Balanchine versus Robbins. Like Balanchine took individual talents and then wanted to use that for his own talent. And then Robbins would come in with like a set idea and mold you into it.
Oh, interesting.
So I guess you're going the Balanchine route. You want
It's a mix. I think that's the ideal, is to be able to work with someone so closely that you're really writing for them. And I think that's a great metaphor for life and community. It's like you see each other and recognize each other. But I also, the reality is that I often don't get to interact with people that much. So I do have to write the score ahead of time, and I'm not interacting with Bob the bassoonist.
Right.
But I try to think of them as people and their health too.
Yeah.
Right.
So what happens when you come to Vail and you have this, like you said, you worked on writing the music ahead of time, you come here, you sit down with Brooklyn Rider. What is that like? Is there any sort of back and forth with them? And I'm sure you were writing this for them. You knew it was going to be for them, and you know them well.
Yeah, there's a little back and forth. A lot of the stuff had to be in place just for Justin and for Tyler and Armand to have something to listen to before Brooklyn Rider could get there. But when we had our first rehearsal, which was yesterday, which feels like a year ago, every day here is a year.
Yes,
oh
absolutely.
My God. We talked about, certain things like tempo for sure, and Justin will kind of adjust that, and especially with the dancers, and then articulation. So, like for instance, they were playing one section very short, like da, 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 da. And I would say, what if it was like dun 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 dun, which changes the quality completely. And you could see it with Tyler, like it just changed. So a lot of those subtle shifts, which I would imagine in dance, you just shift the quality of the movement. It changes everything. And you can't put that on paper. You can't put it in words. You have to see it or hear it. And like, this
is so interesting to me because I've always wondered about there's so much discussion in dance about how things get lost over generations. And dance is really difficult to write down. And video can be, it's the best thing we have, but it's not always you can't directly, you need the choreographer or the coach or whoever to do that. So do you with music, for instance, if you were looking at something Mozart composed, and if you were to play it now, like, do you think Mozart would come and be like, this quality is wrong? Like, if you're not there.
I know. Well, I will say there's endless discussion about this in the music world. Like, how do you play? How actually, literally that exact thing. Do you play it da 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 or dun 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 or boom 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 or boom boom boom? Like, there's so many different things you can do, and at some point, it's like, I feel like Mozart was a great musician, and he would have appreciated a lot of different ways of playing something. But there's a whole, industry based on people wanting to decide exactly how Bach and Mozart and Handel wanted their music played. Right.
So for you as a composer, though, do you, like, when there are moments where your work's being done, but you're not there to oversee it, you don't feel particularly precious about that sort of thing?
I could feel precious about it, but I think it would make my life a lot more difficult and unhappy. and I think that life is short and brief and beautiful, and you've got to let people do what they want to do. And what I really think about when I'm writing music, putting it down on the page, is what is that information telling someone? I mean, it's interesting, like something so with dance, because you can't, like, some things you can write down, some things you can't. But what information do you give to someone so that they feel empowered to make some decisions on their own? So it's like, oh, yes, it's this motion or it's this note, but how I play it is a little bit up to me, which I think is really nice, because it means people can be more creative and invested in what they're doing. And don't feel like they're just executing something that is meant to be repeated exactly the same way. I mean, I have a lot of questions for you about ballet, which we can do not on this podcast.
It's just like, so
there's tradition, like, especially in anything that has a tradition and has been done before, and there are expectations. To what extent do you honor that tradition and expectations and the idea of perfection? And at what point do you step away from it? And I mean,
no, I mean, it's so funny because as you were talking about that, I was like, I see so many parallels, right? Especially in something like, we're so familiar with Balanchine, but something like that where there really is like this very strict tradition and it needs to be done X, Y, and Z way. And then it's like, how do you add yourself on top of that? And inevitably there's always so many ways, like he left room for it, like you're saying, kind of for you to like make it your own, but still honor the choreography. Because as dancers, that's what it's like. The most important thing is to make sure that the choreographer's vision is coming across. And then after that, you kind of put on top. So it's like so parallel to what you're talking about.
As dancers, do you find you have different relationships with different choreographers living in
Well, of course.
Yeah.
But like what you can bring to yourself in it and what is expected.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of like what you're saying. It's like I always felt like we sort of knew Balanchine a little bit just through his work.
Right.
Just like you would say for Tchaikovsky, for example, and I guess for us too, it's like we still have some generations that are alive to tell us what it was like, but it feels, like that.
Yeah. I mean, this is kind of separate from the conversation, but I'm just thinking every time we get into a conversation with a musician, I come into it thinking like it's this very exotic, separate thing, and then by the end of it, I'm like, oh, we're doing the same thing. I mean, when you bring up Bob the bassoonist, and then I'm just like, oh, that's just like, I mean, you're a composer, and you may not be intimately familiar with that instrument, but it's the same way where like Justin's never put on a point shoe. Yeah. It's just the composer or the choreographer. You both have to have like an awareness of all these different tools, even if you haven't necessarily experienced it for yourself.
Yeah. So true. So when did you first start working with dance, and especially so intimately?
Oh, let's see. I mean, obviously I loved dance as a kid. I did ballet, and I wore a red velvet dress to my first Nutcracker. But I was a terrible dancer. I started playing for dance classes in grad school, and I started playing for dance classes when I was about 22, 23, and I fell in love. I was like this. I was at a point where music was something that I loved, but was trying to I didn't understand quite what the classical world was doing, and what does music do for people? Why do you write it? And then I started playing for classes, and you're making music that serves something that's very much in front of you, and is functional, and also is sort of important, but also not important. I always loved that. Like it's not about the composer is not the musician is not the most important thing in the room. You're meant to serve something else. And I think that's a really wonderful way to start thinking about writing music. And And then I started, of course, meeting dancers and making like little pieces that I'd record at home for people and things like that. But I love seeing music change the quality of someone's movement, especially in a really great dancer. Like you would look in class, you see like lots of really good dancers, and you see that one person who is like absolutely like in it in a really particular way. It's very inspiring. Yeah. But I also just love I've always loved, pairings of music and art and music and anything visual. Music is really visual and textural to me, so dance is a natural kind of combination.
It makes me wonder about like when you love dance and you attend performances and you are an integral part of the dance world at this point. Yeah. But you must be especially in tune with something that we all look for in dancers, I hope, but a sense of musicality. Is that something that does that kind of become like the overriding connection for you ever? Or like if there's someone, I can think of a few dancers that are acclaimed, but I would categorize as unmusical, and maybe a dancer could get over that, but I don't know. As a musician, do you ever see someone who's just like, it's just unforgivable?
I don't know enough about it to ever criticize someone for being unmusical, but I can say that I can recognize when someone is, when they're very musical. When they're very musical, I can see that. Can we talk about Tyler Peck for 1 second? Oh my God. Oh, yeah. And Armand, but like, I mean, everyone talks about Tyler's musicality, but it's true. There's certain like, it's not just where you land the end of the phrase with your hand. It's not just a timing thing. It's it's just a reaction. It's really,
she can play with the music.
She can play with, she's not just following it. She's not just,
she's like on top of it. That's the other thing too, that I find you have to be like on top of the music, not like waiting for it to react to it. It's like knowing exactly what comes next.
Our own balancing training. Some people really think that they're like, Makarova was famously like at the back.
Reactionary, yeah.
But people think like because she was so able to like evoke what the music made you feel, that makes her musical, or it's like I think so. I also obviously there's no like exact definition like what is a musical dancer,
right?
Right. Like, actually, I was curious, but if you were going to define that, what is it? What does that mean? Because of course, there's also many kinds of dancers who aren't in ballet who dance with every kinds of music, and there's different kinds of musicality.
Right.
So I would say it's like that dancing on the music and like clearly knowing what comes next. But then for me, it's also like, if you're going to balance and you hit a balance and it's a really good balance, you don't stay. If the music tells you you're supposed to go on, you go on. Like even if your balance is really good, but maybe that is just like a balancing kind of thing.
Well, I don't know if you've met Jeanette Delgado. Obviously, you know Patty.
Oh, yeah.
But
Patricia's sister.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, right. Yeah. Did you both dance with her?
Yeah,
both of them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But Jeanette is someone who has major technical
abilities.
Like she's just a force of nature. But sometimes she would pull things off, but it was about the way that she would then continue to respond.
Right.
Like she would very cleverly, make the next thing a little more concise, or, so that it would be, she could have the moment, the glory, but without like announcing it and then having like missing the next thing, So she's exceptionally musical.
It feels like a respect for the music, like that was still like her driving force, even though she had a great balance or had a great turn.
This is wild to me to think of someone like having a really good balance and then just staying there because it was good. Yeah. Really? People do that?
Oh, I mean, I don't know
gosh.
if this is true, but I've heard about like
there's videos
people
on
like adding repeats in the score, which would like like just to watch someone do it like a 20 count balance. Oh yeah, there was a specific dancer I won't name, but who is very famous for the balancing act, and I'm pretty sure that they would just like, or they slow it to a crawl where it just doesn't even sound like music. So someone who is one of my favorite dancers, again, I won't name them because I guess I'm dragging them, but and she's amazing. But there's this variation in Giselle, in the second act of Giselle, and she comes out of the grave, and there are two sequences. And one is very impressive when it's done very quickly. And then the other, if you have a huge jump, which she did, can be done very slowly. So she's like, comes out and it's like as fast as she can go. Then she runs to the corner and they slow it down. boop, 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 boop. I was just like, this is such a distortion of the music that I can't even watch it, even though it's amazing.
Right.
So
that's actually interesting. Something I want to ask you, because I do feel like sometimes I can tell when you download the music from a ballet. Any classical ballet, it's always played at a different tempo, I feel like, than we would dance it. And so I always wonder, like, for the orchestra, this must be their like preferred tempo. And likely a lot of times it's faster than maybe you would be able to dance it at. So is that something that you take into account when you're creating for dance? And is there ever a time when you're like, oh man, they had to slow that down so much for the dancer or whatever,
distorting
and then
the melody
it's distorting.
or...
No, I try to write thinking, like, knowing that things will change a little bit.
Right.
And that's okay. Like, it's way more important. Like, if, Tyler says, I just need this to be a tiny bit faster or slower. Like, please, by all means,
whatever you want,
whatever you want. And it's also built into it's new music. It's never. I don't have a sense of what it should be yet.
Right.
And as a composer, sometimes there's no one right way. I mean, sometimes it's just on Tuesday I decided that's what the note was going to be,
right.
and I believe in the flexibility in that, and things should be malleable. So I'm not, even if it's like the story you just told, it's like, maybe that was maybe it was totally distorted and really bad. But I think I've grown a lot. I think in my 20s, I would have said like, oh, music, like, why would they change the music? And now I'm like, sure, just like add repeats, do what you need to do. Like, it's okay. It's, do what makes you feel happy. I don't think we should be super protective of something. Yeah.
So it sounds like you really enjoy these parameters that Creating for Dance put up. So when you don't have those, like if you just have a commission where it's just like, Caroline, we need something that's, do you make your own parameters? Like, does that feel, do you enjoy that more or less? Or what are some of the principal differences in creating for ballet and then creating for a different medium?
Yeah, it's a good question, because I've had a lot. Sometimes it's like, Caroline, what would you, here's, do whatever you want. I was like, actually, could you just tell me a little bit? And usually there's, it's a very strict, like, it's an orchestra or it's a choir or it's a string quartet or it's a particular singer. And then you take whatever parameters are available. And usually there's a general time limit. It's like, it's either 5 minutes or 45 minutes and work within that. I think the slight difference between what I make for dance is that I'm thinking about the history of just like dance music, and I like thinking about that. And I'm thinking about counts, and I'm a little more attuned to the sense of regularity of rhythm and meter. Like, I don't make it easy. I'm not making it everything is in 8s and 4s, but leaning more towards that than I would in something else. Sure. And making sure entrances, like, actually we changed something yesterday where I had the viola kind of enter like on the half bar on like a half. It was actually really hard it was just hard to follow. I was like, there's no reason for that. It's not important. Okay. Let's just clip it and have him enter on the beginning of the bar. It makes everyone's life easier and it makes everyone feel better. Yeah. And that's something that I feel like I've just noticed, even it goes back to playing for dance classes where I wouldn't just play anything in a 3. I'd think about making a harmony that is intuitively understood for people so that you can do what you need to do and not be trying to find it. But then you also insert little challenges where there are there is complexity and challenges in there that you have to find, but not 100% of the time. Right. And maybe I don't do that in all of my other music either, but I'm a little more squishy with some things.
Yeah. That makes sense.
No, I wanted to know about something you mentioned last night in the Up Close, where you have different versions. I mean, so what prompts that kind of moment? Is that related to a discussion with Justin where he needs something and he's not quite sure, and so you have to come up with alternatives?
Because you were saying you had 3 different versions, right, of the ending or something?
Actually, I had this in addition to the original version that I had. So I was the first version of the ending that I'd sent a month ago had this long, big, long, obvious Tchaikovsky quote, which is kind of fun. It was like, it would be a big crowd pleaser, and it would be like, oh, I love this.
Right.
And,
2 on the nose.
It was 2 on the nose. Damien felt it. Everyone felt it. It's like too much. So it was like, all right, let's just clip that out. Let's do something else. And then I got to do what I love, which was actually write music to the dance, because he had already choreographed the ending. So I took a little video and I got to see Armand and Tyler doing this full out, the last, 4/8. And I was like, all right, what is that? And then, that's what you always want. That's the ideal. I don't really love writing music ahead of time and then letting someone do something to it, but like writing to the movement. So then in this case, he was he was making something that was combining like lots of quick gestures and I think little references at Tchaikovsky. I don't know. The ending is really fabulous. And I thought, well, I could write something that's really fast that matches that. Or what I did and what I think he liked is that it suddenly breaks right there and becomes this splintered pizzicato that like feels like it's falling apart. That looks to me like what the painting of the dance looks like, which is really fun.
That's so interesting to me. I love that. That's so fascinating because that's just probably, I mean, I don't know of any instance in our career where there was a new work being made where the composer got to, it's the flip, total flip. You normally music first.
Right.
I mean,
always.
Yeah, always first and then dance later.
Well, I can think of one example of that maybe was from Vail Dance Festival with you and Buck, Lil Buck.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, we have to
we got
tell
to
you
nerd
this.
out before.
So that music, this is the one that you guys created. Was it like 2018-ish?
Yeah.
Maybe?
I think we're doing it again. Actually. We're working on it. We had a little bit. Yeah.
Okay, wait. So you have to hear this. This is like, that was the theme song of our entire time.
It's so funny to, like, Rebecca and I would just sing it to each other and
all the time.
Like,
Because can you sing it? Could you sing it now?
Ooh, that's so
it's too
embarrassing.
No, it's like a repetitive.
Okay, ready?
No.
Let's do it.
No, you don't. Yeah.
But what I really want to know is, do you have that on something that I can listen to regularly? Because it's
Send
like,
that to you.
oh my God.
Oh my
Do you think
God.
we could like play it at the end of the podcast for people?
Oh, we love it. It was our favorite.
Caroline,
I mean,
it's so good.
I think at this point, probably our listen.
Yeah.
That sounds a little more like what it's supposed to be. But that was a little more of this kind of like dance was being created as this. Yes,
Definitely. We decided that was a piece where I wanted to make something completely at Vail, side by side, talking to him. And I had Buck come to my room and record, which actually he just did again yesterday. So I have a whole new recording of Buck talking. It's like, we should just do something more with this.
Yeah.
Making it really together.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, I listening to you say that you like this flip version of working where the other art form comes first made me think, have you worked a lot in film ever? Because obviously that's the way that works.
Yeah, I know. Like that's,
you edit the scene and then, then the composer sees and tries to like, lift whatever mood the scene is trying to capture.
Yeah, that's what I think is so funny that dance is. I guess I didn't think it was always flipped, but I guess it is. Yeah. And in film, it's obviously the other way around with occasional exceptions. I also really like that. I've dipped into film scoring a little bit here and there. It's like I don't want to do that all the time, but I do. I love scoring to picture. You have something to look at. There's an emotional quality or a person or a character or a space or time limits that you can work within, and I find it really fun. I mean, a lot of the music that I write, even concert music, not related to anything else, is like I'm thinking of a painting or an art form or something that I saw, and almost scoring that. Like, if that was music, what would it be? Actually, Tyler's doing this piece called Thousandth Orange, which is a piano and strings, and that was just this idea of like, what is the beauty of an orange? And like, if you saw this orange twisted like it's like actually thinking about Van Gogh and how he would paint sunflowers over and over and over again. What would that sound like if you heard that many times over many years? Anyway, so
it's beautiful.
But there should be way more of the flip in dance and music. I mean, we would love that,
right?
Yeah. Well, that's so cool. I don't know. I think there's a commission in there.
Right.
Like, I don't know. It seems like
an experiment.
Maybe this needs to happen. I don't know. It seems like surely someone has done that.
I mean, people do it. I guess there's some choreographers who like to choreograph without music, and then you add something later. But it depends on what the relationship is.
Yeah.
Well, I guess like Cunningham. I mean, it's all done.
Those are separate, though. They're never meant to really like.
Relate. That's true.
The music isn't meant to.
Right. So it would kind of be like Cunningham, but with the composer being like, I'm trying to make this work.
Right. Right. Yeah. Right. Actually, it was interesting with Pam, making a piece with Pam 2 years ago, where we also made it side by side. But she also has come from a Cunningham background, so she didn't really want the music to actually work perfectly with it. She's like, I don't want to dance to the music, and I want you to write for the dance. I want them to be side by side, but I can't really help it. I was like, well, I see, there's always some relationship whether you make it intentional or not.
And what about during this past year, dance moved to film so much? Is that something that you were at all involved with, doing any scoring for dance that then went on film?
I didn't do any this year. Some other projects. I really missed really miss live things a lot. Yeah.
Yeah.
So what are some of the live things you might have coming up in the next year or so as live theater?
Live theater stuff.
So we're so grateful is coming back.
Thank goodness. I know. I miss live theater so much. There's a juggling company in London run by Sean Gandini.
Wow.
And this is the company that did the Met Opera's Akhenaten with the Philip Glass opera. And it's in the back of this Philip Glass opera was a juggling company. They were sort of integrated throughout. So it's like dance, but with these objects.
I wanted to see that so bad. I think everyone was talking about it. Yeah.
But this is anyway, he's a really interesting mind, and we're making something together. I'm very excited about that.
Cool.
Writing a bunch of stuff. This big pile. My phone is like telling me the things I'm supposed to be doing, but I really just want to sit outside.
Yeah.
It's so beautiful here.
What about your album that you put out in June of 2021? Tell us a little bit about that. We were listening to it while we prepared for our podcast.
Oh. It's called Let the Soil Play Its Simple Part, and it is a deep collaboration between a percussion quartet called So Percussion. They live in Brooklyn, 4 guys, and myself. And I had previously worked with them on another project, and we decided, what if we go into a studio and I don't come in like a composer like I usually do, where I'm like directing everything and here's the stuff,
right?
But like just writing songs together. So we wrote these 10 songs. There's texts from poet Ann Carson and some old like shape note hymn texts and some of my own. Hope you like it.
Where can we listen to it?
You can listen to it wherever you listen to music.
Okay.
Preferably not Spotify, but I use Spotify too.
Yeah. Great.
Well, thank you so much.
Thank you. I feel like I could ask you back a million questions. Maybe we should do another podcast where I just ask you questions.
Okay, let's do it.
Thanks
Anytime.
for having me.
Great.
Thank you.
I started to climb when I was 13. I started to climb. I started to climb when I was 13. 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 Jookin is the house. Foundation. Jookin is the house. Foundation. I feel it with so much substance. Foundation. I feel it with so much substance. Foundation. So much substance. I feel it with so much substance. Passion, drive, grit, grind. Passion, grit, drive, grit, drive, grind. Passion, grit, drive. drive, passion, grit, run, ready to run, passion, drive, passion, drive, ready to passion, feel it with so much substance. Every step is a downbeat. Nathaniel, Joanne, Mickey, Terry, Arthur, Riley, Charles. Maybe I could say something. 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 Maybe I could say something.